2:15 in the morning, over the Persian Gulf, Scalpel One One, a B-52 Stratofortress, was already banking heavily toward the south. Major Miller felt the massive airframe groan as it moved away from the Iranian coastline. This was not a routine flight. Moments ago, Miller and his crew had released a full payload of precision-guided munitions. This was a direct strike on 3 hardened radar facilities near Bandar Abbas. The mission was the climax of a month of rising tensions. The cockpit was bathed in the dim red glow of tactical lighting. Below the flight deck, in the windowless belly of the bomber, the radar navigator stared at his monitors. Captain Vance watched the high-resolution thermal feed from the targeting pod. He saw the black plumes of smoke rising from the desert floor. He saw the white-hot signatures of secondary explosions. Vance spoke into the interphone. "Major, all munitions are away and accounted for. We have 3 confirmed hits on all primary targets. Battle damage assessment shows total destruction. Those radar sites are gone." Miller responded with professional distance. "Copy that. Alert the Combat Information Center on the carrier. Tell them Scalpel One One is off station and returning to base." The mission had been executed with surgical precision. There had been no surface-to-air missiles launched in defense. There had been no Iranian interceptors. To the crew of the B-52, it felt like a perfect success. But why did the tactical displays show the Iranian early warning net still functioning? If the radars were rubble, the screen should have been blank. Instead, the electronic signatures remained steady. 2:22 in the morning. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Abraham Lincoln, hundreds of miles from the strike zone, the room was a hive of controlled intensity. Blue-green light reflected off the faces of young technicians. Admiral Harrison stood at the center of the room. He watched the main display. A green icon represented Scalpel One One. A series of red icons represented the targets they had just hit. The tactical officer spoke to the admiral. "Sir, Scalpel One One reports mission success. They are confirming 3 for 3. Total destruction of the Bandar Abbas array." Harrison nodded. "Good. We have established the buffer. Signal the State Department. Tell them the strike is complete." The admiral turned to leave, but a sudden murmur from the intelligence pit stopped him. A junior analyst had her headset pressed tight against her ear. She was staring at a secondary monitor. It was a live feed from Iranian state television. The analyst spoke with a trembling voice. "Sir, you need to see this. Right now." 2:30 in the morning. Iranian State News Headquarters. The screen flickered to life with a breaking news banner in Farsi. A news anchor began speaking with frantic energy. The image cut to a live remote broadcast. The camera panned across a pristine desert landscape. In the background, the massive lattice structures of the radar facilities stood tall against the night sky. There was no fire. There was no smoke. There was no twisted metal. Standing directly in front of the main radar array was a high-ranking Iranian official. He was surrounded by international journalists. He gestured toward the machinery behind him. It was hummed with power. The radar dishes were rotating. They were fully operational. Inside the B-52, Miller felt a cold sensation in his chest. His sensors were telling him he had just destroyed those towers. His eyes had seen the thermal blooms of the explosions. But on the live feed, playing in command centers across the world, the targets were untouched. Miller keyed his radio. "Control, this is Scalpel One One. We are seeing the broadcast. We are looking at our own recorded strike data. Something is wrong. We saw them burn." The controller responded from the carrier. "Scalpel, hold your position. Do not cross the 24th parallel. We are attempting to verify. Stay alert." The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 2:32 in the morning. The Combined Air Operations Center, Al Udeid Air Base. The air in the windowless room was thick with the hum of high-powered servers. Intelligence officers sat in rows of glowing workstations. On the main wall, a massive screen displayed the live feed from Iranian state television. Beside it, the recorded thermal video from the B-52 strike. The discrepancy was impossible to ignore. One screen showed a scorched wasteland, the other showed a pristine military installation. Lieutenant Sarah Chen was the lead imagery analyst for the mission. She leaned closer to her screen. Her hands moved across the keyboard. She was comparing the telemetry from the munitions to the broadcast coordinates. Chen spoke to her supervisor. Major, the GPS coordinates for the hits are exact. Scalpel One One dropped 12 joint direct attack munitions. Every single one impacted the designated aim points. I have the infrared signatures of the detonations. They are authentic. The Major looked at the live feed from Iran. Then what are we looking at on the news? That is a live broadcast. Look at the shadows from the floodlights. Look at the people moving in the background. That is not a recording. I am checking the signal source, Chen replied. It is coming directly from the Bandar Abbas transmitter. If this is a deepfake, it is the most sophisticated one in history. 2:36 in the morning. The cockpit of Scalpel One One. Major Miller checked his fuel gauges. The massive bomber was holding a steady orbit over the dark waters of the Gulf. He looked out of the side window, 10 miles to the east. His wingman, Scalpel One Two, was a dark shape against the stars. The radio crackled. It was the navigator, Captain Vance. Major, I am looking at the post-strike imagery again. I saw the fuel tanks go up. I saw the primary radar dish collapse. There is no way that facility is standing. Miller tightened his grip on the control yoke. Maybe we hit a decoy site. Maybe the Iranians built a replica. Vance shook his head. Negative. Our intelligence gave us those coordinates based on 6 months of satellite surveillance. We watched them build it. We saw the electronic emissions coming from those exact towers for weeks. We did not hit a plywood movie set. We did not hit a plywood movie set. A new alert tone chirped on the tactical display. A yellow icon appeared on the northern edge of the radar screen. Then another. Miller spoke into the radio. Control. Scalpel One One has 2 fast movers climbing out of Shiraz. Bearing 020. Speed. Mach 0.9. They are heading straight for the coast. The controller responded instantly. Copy. Scalpel. We see them. We have 4 more targets launching from Bushehr. They are Iranian Air Force 14 Tomcats. They are not responding to international hailing frequencies. 2:39 in the morning. Iranian Air Defense Command. Tehran. Colonel Arash sat in a command chair overlooking a circular map of the Gulf. He was a veteran of 20 years. He did not look like a man who had just survived an airstrike. He looked like a man who was setting a trap. He looked like a man who was setting a trap. An officer stood at attention beside him. The Americans are loitering in the international corridor. The Americans are loitering in the international corridor. They are confused. Our pilots have visual on the B-52 formation. Arash nodded slowly. The Americans believe they have struck our soil. They have committed an act of war based on a lie. They see smoke where there is no fire. Tell our pilots to achieve a hard radar lock. If the Americans do not turn back in 2 minutes, they are to engage. Inside the B-52, the electronic warfare suite began to scream. A steady, high-pitched tone filled the cockpit. It was the sound of a fire control radar locking onto the aircraft. Miller looked at his co-pilot. They have a lock. They are ready to fire. The sky was empty and black, but the radar screen was beginning to crawl with ghosts. 2:40 in the morning. High over the Strait of Hormuz. The electronic warfare display in the B-52 began to pulse with a jagged red strobe. The sound was a steady chirping in Major Miller's headset. It was the signature of a pulse Doppler radar. The Iranian F-14s were no longer just tracking them. They were searching for a firing solution. Miller keyed his radio. Control. Scalpel One One. We are being painted. The bandits are closing at Mach 1.2, requesting permission to egress to the south immediately. The response from the carrier was not what Miller expected. Scalpel One One. This is Lincoln Control. Negative. Do not. I repeat. Do not egress to the south. You are ordered to hold your current orbit. Maintain your position over international waters. Miller looked at his co-pilot. His brow was furrowed beneath his visor. Hold? We just dropped 20,000 pounds of high explosives on their soil. If we stay here, we are target practice. Miller spoke back into the radio. Control. Confirm order. You want us to loiter in the engagement zone? We are low on fuel and we have active locks on our tail. Confirmed. Scalpel, the controller replied. The Situation Room is reviewing the live broadcast. There is a high-level dispute over the target status. We cannot allow you to leave until we verify what actually happened on the ground. If you leave now, we lose the eyes on the target. 2:43 in the morning. Inside an Iranian F-14 Tomcat, Major Javan felt the vibration of the twin engines through his flight suit. His radar screen showed two large symbols, the American bombers. They were slow, they were heavy, they were vulnerable. Javan looked down to his left. He could see the coastline of his country. There were no fires, there were no emergency lights flashing in the distance. The city of Bandar Abbas looked peaceful. Javan spoke to his radar intercept officer in the back seat. Look at the coast. There is no damage. The Americans claimed they struck the radar sites, but the sites are still transmitting. Why are they still here? The officer responded, maybe they missed, or maybe they are waiting for a second wave. I have a solid lock on the lead bomber. Distance is 25 nautical miles. Javan's hand tightened on the stick. If they missed, they will try again. We will not give them the chance. 2:45 in the morning. The Combat Information Center of the USS Abraham Lincoln. Admiral Harrison stood over the shoulder of the intelligence officer. They were looking at a side-by-side comparison of the B-52 targeting feed and the Iranian news broadcast. The officer pointed at the screen. Sir, look at the shadows. In the B-52 feed, the shadows from the radar towers are pointing west. That matches the moon's position at the time of the strike. But look at the Iranian news feed. The shadows under the officials are pointing east. Harrison leaned in. Explain that. The Iranian footage is live, the officer said. But the light source isn't the moon. They have massive stadium lights set up just out of frame. They were prepared for this. They knew we were coming. And they wanted the world to see the towers standing. But Scalpel One One reported hits, Harrison said. They have the video of the explosions. Yes, sir, the officer replied. But we are starting to think they didn't hit the towers. They hit something else. Something the Iranians wanted them to hit. Something the Iranians wanted them to hit. 2:48 in the morning. The cockpit of Scalpel One One. The RWR tone changed. The chirping became a solid, high-pitched scream. This was no longer a search. It was a missile guidance lock. Miller's voice was calm, but urgent. Control. Scalpel One One. We have a continuous wave lock. The bandit is in the heart of the envelope. If we do not maneuver now, we are going to lose the aircraft. The radio stayed silent for 5 long seconds. Then the controller spoke. Scalpel, you are cleared to defensive maneuvers, but do not, under any circumstances, return fire. I repeat, do not engage. Brake left and deploy countermeasures. Miller didn't wait. He shoved the throttles forward and banked the massive bomber into a steep turn. Scalpel 1-2. Brake left. Flares. 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 The night sky behind the B-52 lit up with a string of brilliant magnesium candles. The Iranian pilots watched the ghosts multiply on their screens. The finger was on the trigger. The war was seconds away. 2:46 in the morning. Tampa, Florida. 7,000 miles from the Persian Gulf. The headquarters of United States Central Command was fully illuminated. General Bradley stood in the center of the secure video teleconference room. He stared at 3 different screens. One showed the live Iranian news broadcast. One showed the black and white thermal recording from the B-52. The third showed a high-resolution satellite image that had been taken only 60 seconds ago. The general pointed at the satellite image. Explain what I am seeing. This was taken 1 minute ago. The National Reconnaissance Office says the radar site is intact. but the bomber crew says they dropped 12,000 pounds of high explosives on those exact coordinates. How is that possible? A senior intelligence officer adjusted his glasses. Sir, we are analyzing the telemetry. The global positioning system coordinates provided to the munitions were perfect. The bombs hit exactly where they were told to hit. However, we believe the Iranians moved the actual radar towers 300 meters to the north last week. They replaced the original site with a highly realistic physical decoy, plywood, metal sheeting, and heat generators to mimic the electronic signature. Bradley's voice was low. A decoy. We hit a dummy site? It is worse than that. Sir, the officer replied. They didn't just build a decoy. They used a sophisticated electronic spoofing system. They allowed our satellites to see what they wanted us to see. They lured us into a strike on a worthless target, all so they could broadcast the intact towers to the world and claim we are the aggressors. They made us look incompetent and hostile at the same time. 2:48 in the morning. The cockpit of Scalpel One One. Major Miller was breathing heavily into his mask. The massive bomber was vibrating as he pushed it through a high-gravity turn. Behind him, the sky was lit by the dying glow of his defensive flares. The Iranian F-14s were still there. They were closing the distance. Miller keyed the radio. Control, we are defensive. The bandits are inside 15 nautical miles. We are being painted by multiple fire control radars, requesting permission to arm our air-to-air missiles for self-defense. The voice of the admiral came through the headset. It was no longer the controller. It was the commander of the strike group, Scalpel One One. This is Lincoln 1. Negative. Your weapons are to remain on safe. Your rules of engagement are tight. I repeat, weapons tight. Do not. Repeat. Do not fire unless you are visually certain a missile has been launched at you. Sir, Miller shouted over the roar of the engines. At this range, if they fire, we are dead. We cannot outturn a Phoenix missile in a B-52. Maintain discipline. Scalpel, the admiral replied. If you fire first, this becomes a full-scale war based on a deception. We are trying to find a way to de-escalate. Hold your nerve. 2:50 in the morning. Iranian Air Defense Command, Tehran. Colonel Arash watched the digital map. The American bombers were dancing. They were dropping flares. They were showing fear to the world. It looked like the Americans had tried to destroy a peaceful facility and failed. Now, they were trapped in Iranian-monitored airspace. Arash spoke to his deputy. The Americans are not firing. Why are they not firing? They are confused. Colonel, the deputy replied. They know their strike failed. They are waiting for orders. Arash smiled. Then we will give them a reason to move. Tell Major Javan to close to within 5 miles. Tell him to fly alongside the lead bomber. I want him to look the American pilot in the eye. Let them see our missiles. Let them know we have the power to end this. Inside the Iranian cockpit, Javan eased the throttles forward. The F-14 surged ahead. He could see the massive tail of the B-52 now. It was a giant gray ghost in the moonlight. He moved his hand to the weapon selection switch. He moved it to Sidewinder. He was close enough to see the individual rivets on the American wing. He was close enough to start a war. 2:51 in the morning. High over the dark waters of the Gulf, Major Miller looked out the left window of the cockpit. A shadow appeared from the blackness. It was the twin-tailed silhouette of an Iranian F-14 Tomcat. It was so close that Miller could see the orange glow of the Iranian pilot's cockpit instruments. The fighter was only 30 meters from his wingtip. The B-52 began to shudder in the wake turbulence of the fighter. Miller fought the controls to keep the heavy bomber stable. His co-pilot was staring at the Iranian jet. He saw the white shape of a long-range missile hanging under the fuselage. Miller spoke into the radio. Control, Scalpel One One. The bandit is on my left wing. Distance is 30 meters. He is flying aggressive. I am experiencing severe wake turbulence. Requesting permission to break formation to the west immediately. On the carrier, Admiral Harrison watched the two icons on the radar screen. They were so close, they had merged into a single flickering light. The Admiral keyed his radio. Scalpel, this is Lincoln 1. Negative. Do not break west. If you turn toward him, he will interpret it as a ramming maneuver. Stay steady. Maintain your heading. Do not give him an excuse. 2:53 in the morning. Inside the Iranian Tomcat, Major Javan felt the adrenaline surging. He was looking at the massive American bomber. It was a giant, a slow and clumsy giant. He wanted to push the Americans further. He tilted his wings, showing the American pilot the full rack of missiles under his belly. He wanted them to feel the weight of his presence. Javan spoke to his backseat officer. He is struggling to stay level. Look at him. Javan moved his thumb to the missile selection switch. I have a tone. The heat seeker is locked on his inboard engine. Inside, the B-52. The alarm changed again. A low-frequency growl filled the headsets of the crew. The electronic warfare officer shouted from the lower deck. Major, he has an infrared lock on engine number 3. He is tracking our heat signature. He is ready to fire. Miller's hand was hovering over the master arm switch. He was a professional, but he was also a pilot with 6 crew members behind him. He could not sit still and wait to be shot down. Control. This is Miller. If he fires, we are gone. I am arming my defensive systems now. I will not die for a news broadcast. The Admiral's voice was a roar in his ears. Miller, do not arm your weapons. That is an order. We are detecting a new signal from the mainland. Something is happening at the radar site. Hold your position for 60 more seconds. 2:54 in the morning. The Combined Air Operations Center. Lieutenant Chen was staring at a new data stream. The Iranian news broadcast was still showing the intact radar towers, but the signal was beginning to degrade. Static was creeping into the edges of the frame. Chen shouted to her supervisor, Major, look at the official standing in front of the radar. His hand just passed through the metal railing behind him. It is a digital artifact. The entire broadcast is a projection. They are using a high-powered holographic overlay at the site of the ruins. Can you prove it? The Major asked. I am running the filter now, Chen replied. In 10 seconds, I can strip away the digital layer. 2:55 in the morning. Over the Gulf. Inside the Iranian cockpit, Javan saw the American bomber's bomb bay doors twitch. It was a mechanical vibration caused by the extreme turbulence, but Javan saw it as a threat. He believed the Americans were preparing to drop more munitions on his country. Javan shouted into his radio, Command, the bomber is opening its bay. He is preparing for a second strike, requesting permission to engage immediately. Requesting permission to engage immediately. The answer from Tehran was a single word, engage. Javan's finger tightened on the trigger. The heat-seeking missile was screaming in his ears. He was ready to pull. 2:56 in the morning. High over the dark waters of the Gulf. Inside the Iranian cockpit, Major Javan felt time slow down. His thumb pressed the red button on the control stick. The aircraft shuddered as a heat-seeking missile detached from the wing rail. A massive plume of white fire lit up the night. It illuminated the underside of the B-52 like a flash of lightning. Javan shouted into his radio. Fox 2. Missile away. Target is engaged. 2:57 in the morning. The cockpit of Scalpel One One. The missile launch detector began to scream a frantic, high-pitched trill. It was the sound of impending death. Major Miller saw the white streak of the missile motor in his side mirror. It was a jagged line of fire reaching out for his inboard engines. Miller reacted with instinct. Missile. 6 o'clock. Braking right. Flares. 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 He shoved the control yoke to the right. The massive bomber groaned. The wings flexed under the sudden stress. Hundreds of magnesium flares erupted from the tail of the aircraft. They created a blinding curtain of white light behind the bomber. The heat-seeking missile was confused by the sudden wall of heat. It veered sharply to the left. It streaked past the B-52's tail, missing the fuselage by less than 10 meters. The missile exploded harmlessly in the empty air. The shockwave rocked the bomber, but the airframe held. Miller's voice was ragged. Control. We have a confirmed launch. I am declaring an emergency. I am returning fire. Major Vance. Get a lock on that Tomcat. 2:58 in the morning. The Combined Air Operations Center. Al Udeid Air Base. Lieutenant Chen was screaming at her monitor. "Major, look at the feed. Now. It is falling apart." On the main screen, the Iranian news broadcast began to vibrate. The image of the pristine radar towers flickered like a dying light bulb. For a split second, the digital mask vanished. Behind the official, the screen showed what was actually there. A landscape of twisted steel and black craters. The towers were gone. The fire was real. The Iranian government was broadcasting a digital ghost over the ruins of their own base. They were using high-powered projectors to create a three-dimensional image in the desert air. The major grabbed the secure phone. "Get the carrier. Tell them the broadcast is a fraud. The strike was successful. Tell them the Iranians are fighting a ghost war." 2:59 in the morning. Over the Gulf. Major Javan saw his missile miss. He saw the American bomber turning toward him. He saw the B-52's defensive guns beginning to track his movement. He prepared to fire his second missile. His hand was trembling. Then, something happened that neither pilot expected. Every screen in the American cockpit went black. The radio went silent. The GPS navigation system vanished. The B-52 was flying blind. 10 miles away. On the Iranian fighter. The same thing was happening. Javan's radar screen went dark. His engines began to surge and sputter. His flight computer began to reboot. The entire electromagnetic spectrum over the Persian Gulf had been silenced. It was not a jammer from the Americans. It was not a hack from the Iranians. It was a total, absolute blackout. Miller looked out at the horizon. Power is out. I have no instruments. I have no radio. I am flying by the seat of my pants. Inside the Iranian jet, Javan was fighting to keep his plane in the air. He looked at the American bomber. It was a dark shadow against the stars. Both men were suddenly alone in a silent sky. Then, a massive, blue-white light erupted from the center of the Bandar Abbas ruins. It was not an explosion. It was a pillar of energy that reached into the stratosphere. It bypassed the digital hologram. It bypassed the physical ruins. It tore through the clouds like a physical blade. The morning was no longer quiet. The world was about to change. 2:59 and 40 seconds in the morning. Over the Persian Gulf. The blue light was not heat. It was pure energy. It climbed into the sky like a solid pillar of sapphire. Inside the cockpit of Scalpel One One, Major Miller felt the hair on his arms stand up. Every screen on his dashboard went black. The hum of the electronics vanished. The only sound was the rush of air over the canopy and the muffled roar of 8 engines running on manual fuel control. The B-52 was no longer a high-tech weapon system. It was a 90-ton glider. To his left, the Iranian F-14 was a dark silhouette. Its navigation lights had vanished. The orange glow of its cockpit was gone. Major Javan was struggling with the stick. The Tomcat was pitching and rolling in the ionized air. The missile that Javan had been ready to fire was now a dead weight on his wing. The digital brain of the weapon had been fried by the discharge. 3 o'clock in the morning. The silence was absolute. There were no radio calls. There were no radar warnings. There was only the blue glow reflecting off the clouds. Major Miller reached for the manual trim wheel. He used his physical strength to level the heavy bomber. He turned his head and looked directly at the Iranian pilot. Through the clear air of the Gulf, Miller could see Javan's silhouette. The two men were less than 40 meters apart. They were moving at 500 miles per hour. Both were blind. Both were helpless. Miller lifted his left hand. He flattened his palm and pressed it against the glass of the canopy. It was the universal signal for a ceasefire. He held it there, waiting. Inside the Iranian cockpit, Javan saw the gesture. He looked at his own dead instruments. He looked back at the American. He realized that if either of them made a sudden move, they would collide in the dark. He raised his own hand. He mirrored the gesture. 3 o'clock and 30 seconds in the morning, 700 miles away. The Combat Information Center on the USS Abraham Lincoln was in a state of total panic. Every radar screen was filled with static. The satellite link was dead. Admiral Harrison gripped the edge of the plotting table. Where are they? I lost the bombers. I lost the bandits. Everything north of the 24th parallel is a dead zone. The technical officer was typing furiously. Sir, we are detecting a massive atmospheric ionization event centered on Bandar Abbas. It is an electromagnetic surge. It didn't come from a weapon. It came from the ground. When our bombs hit that decoy site, they triggered a subterranean capacitor bank. The Iranians didn't just build a hologram. They built a trap designed to shut down every electronic device within a 50-mile radius. They neutralized our entire strike package without firing a shot, Harrison whispered. 3:45 in the morning. In Tehran, Colonel Arash stood in his command center. He was also staring at empty screens. He had lost contact with Major Javan. He had lost the live feed of the radar towers. The blue light had blinded his own country as well. Arash turned to his deputy. We have achieved the objective. The Americans have been stopped, but our own pilots are in the dark. If they do not communicate, they will kill each other. 3:55 in the morning. Back in the sky, the blue light began to fade. The pillar of energy retreated into the desert floor. The sky returned to a deep, natural black. Slowly, one by one, the systems in the B-52 began to flicker. A backup battery kicked in. A single emergency screen glowed red. The radio hissed with static. Major Miller keyed the mic. He didn't call the carrier. He stayed on the International Guard frequency. To the aircraft on my left wing, this is the American pilot. Do you hear me? A long pause followed. Then a voice crackled through the noise. It was Javan. His English was accented but clear. I hear you. My engines are failing. I have a fuel leak. Miller looked out the window. He could see a thin trail of white vapor coming from the 14. The wake turbulence, or the EMP, had ruptured a line. Miller spoke with a calm authority. Stay on my wing. I will lead you toward the coast. Do not maneuver. We are finishing this now. Copy, Javan replied. I am following. The two enemies, who had been seconds away from killing one another, were now flying in a silent, broken formation. The war had been paused by a shadow. 3:05 in the morning, high over the center of the Persian Gulf. The cockpit of the B-52 was a graveyard of dead electronics. Only the standby instruments, the mechanical altimeter, and the whiskey compass glowed with a faint, radioactive luminescence. Major Miller kept his eyes locked on the dark shape of the Iranian F-14. The fighter was wobbling. The white mist of fuel venting from its left wing was visible in the moonlight, trailing behind like a tattered silk ribbon. Miller keyed the guard frequency. Major Javan, your fuel state is critical. I am seeing heavy venting from your port side engine nacelle. You need to shut down that engine and trim for single-engine flight. Do you copy? The response was choked with static. I have no hydraulic pressure. The controls are becoming heavy. I cannot maintain this bank. Listen to my voice, Miller said, his tone steady and rhythmic. I am going to move Scalpel One One to your right side. I will give you a stable reference point. Do not look at your instruments. Look at my wingtip. Match my angle. We are taking you home. 3:12 in the morning. The Combat Information Center of the USS Abraham Lincoln. The primary radar screens flickered back to life, but they were jagged with interference. A single, large blip appeared on the edge of the screen. It was moving slowly toward the Iranian coast. The tactical officer leaned over the glowing glass table. Admiral, I have a contact. It is Scalpel One One. But sir, there is another signature merged with it. They are flying in a tight formation, almost touching. Admiral Harrison stared at the screen. Is he being hijacked? Is the Iranian pilot forcing him toward the mainland? Negative, sir, the officer replied. The B-52 is in the lead. He is leading the bandit. We are intercepting voice transmissions on the International Guard channel. Miller he is talking him down. He is giving him flight instructions. Harrison felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple. The Iranians have a second wave of interceptors launching from Bandar Abbas. They see an American bomber approaching their coast with one of their own pilots as a shield. They are going to think it is a ruse. They are going to fire. 3:18 in the morning. Iranian Air Defense Command. Tehran. Colonel Arash was shouting into a telephone. The room was in chaos as technicians tried to reboot the servers fried by the capacitor discharge. On the backup radar, he saw the twin icons approaching. Order the Shiraz batteries to stand down, Arash commanded. I said stand down. If we fire on that formation, we kill Javan. The American is not attacking. He is towing him in. His deputy looked up, face pale in the emergency lighting. The local commander at Bandar Abbas is not answering. He saw the blue light. He thinks the Americans have used a secret weapon. He has authorized the local surface-to-air missile crews to fire at will. 3:25 in the morning. Over the Iranian coastline, Major Miller saw the horizon beginning to glow with a faint, pre-dawn light. Below them, the rugged mountains of Iran were taking shape. The 14 was now lower than the bomber, its nose pitching up and down as Javan fought the dying flight controls. Almost there, Javan, Miller said. I see the lights of the airfield. 2 minutes to the coast. Stay with me. Suddenly, the B-52's tail warning receiver began to chirp. It was a faint, dying sound, but it was unmistakable. A ground-based radar had just achieved a hard lock. Major! Javan's voice screamed over the radio. Break away. The batteries at the coast are active. They are tracking you. You must turn south now. Miller looked at the 14. If he turned now, the wake turbulence from his massive wings would flip the crippled fighter into a terminal spin. Javan would not survive the maneuver. I am staying, Miller said. A moment later, 2 streaks of orange fire erupted from the dark coastline. They were not fuel leaks. They were not decoys. 2 surface-to-air missiles were climbing into the sky, their heat-seeking eyes locked onto the massive engines of the B-52. The American crew watched the missiles grow larger. They were trapped between a rescue and a massacre. 3:26 in the morning, over the Iranian coastline, the 2 surface-to-air missiles were moving at 3 times the speed of sound. Their exhaust trails were 2 bright orange needles stitching the dark sky together. Inside the cockpit of the B-52, Major Miller watched them climb. His finger hovered over the flare release, but he hesitated. If he pumped a cloud of burning magnesium into the air now, the sudden heat and light would overwhelm Major Javan's night vision. The Iranian pilot was already struggling to stay upright. A wall of fire in front of his canopy would be a death sentence. Miller keyed the radio. Javan, they are locked on me. If I maneuver, you are going to stall. Do you have any contact with that battery? Javan's voice was a frantic rasp. I am trying. I am transmitting on the local command frequency. They are not listening. They think I am a ghost. Javan shifted his grip on the stick. He looked at the missiles. Then he looked at the massive wing of the American bomber. He made a choice. He kicked his right rudder pedal. The crippled 14 yawed sharply to the right. It moved directly into the path of the incoming missiles. 3:27 in the morning. Inside the Iranian missile battery, Bandar Abbas, the battery commander stared at his radar scope. The 2 targets had merged. Suddenly, a friendly identification signal began to pulse on his screen. It was weak, distorted by the earlier electromagnetic pulse, but it was there. The commander's eyes went wide. Abort. Abort the launch. Destruct the missiles. The technician hit the safety override. 2 miles up in the atmosphere, the 2 missiles received the command. Their warheads detonated simultaneously. 2 massive balls of orange flame expanded in the sky, turning the night into day for a single, heart-stopping second. 3:28 in the morning. The shockwave hit both aircraft. The B-52 rocked violently, but its massive weight kept it level. The 14 was not so lucky. The blast of air caught the crippled wing. Javan's jet flipped onto its back. I am losing it, Javan cried out. Engines are out. I am punching out. Negative. Negative, Miller yelled. You are over the mountains. You will never be found. Hold the stick. Look at my lights. Pull. Pull. Miller eased his throttles back. He allowed the B-52 to sink. He used the massive shadow of his own aircraft to block the wind. He created a pocket of stable air for the falling fighter. Slowly, the F-14's nose began to rise. The wings leveled. Javan had caught the draft. "I have it," Javan whispered. "I am level." 3:35 in the morning. The edge of the Bandar Abbas runway. The lights of the Iranian airbase were fully visible now. Fire trucks and ambulances were lined up along the tarmac. Major Miller looked down at his altitude. They were at 3,000 feet. "Major Javan," Miller said, "this is as far as I can go. You are on the glide path. Drop your gear and go home." The Iranian pilot looked out his canopy. He saw the American bomber beginning a slow, heavy bank toward the south, toward the safety of the international corridor. Javan keyed his radio one last time. "Major Miller, my country will say this never happened. They will say the radar towers were never hit. And they will say, I never flew tonight." Miller looked at the black horizon. "My country will probably say the same thing. Major. Good luck on the landing." "Thank you," Javan replied. For the eyes, 3:42 in the morning. Over the international waterline, Major Miller watched the radar screen. A single icon was descending toward the Iranian coast. It touched the line of the runway and stopped. Javan was down. Miller turned his head to his co-pilot. The red tactical lights were still glowing. The cockpit was quiet. "Vance, get me the carrier. Tell them Scalpel One One is coming home. Tell them we are the only ones who know the truth." The sky was beginning to turn a pale, dusty gray in the east. The blue light was gone. The missiles were gone. The only thing left was the hum of 8 engines and the long flight back to the ship. 5:15 in the morning. The flight deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln. The salt air was cold and sharp. Major Miller climbed down the ladder from the cockpit of the B-52. His flight suit was damp with sweat. His legs felt heavy. Around him, the flight deck was a chaotic symphony of yellow-shirted crew members and the scream of jet engines. But for Miller, the world felt unnervingly quiet. He walked toward the island of the carrier. Admiral Harrison was standing at the hatch. He was not wearing his formal bridge coat. He looked like a man who had not slept in 48 hours. The Admiral didn't salute. He simply nodded toward the ready room. "The recorders are being impounded, Major. Your crew is being sequestered for a Level 1 debrief. Official word from the Pentagon is already out." Miller stopped. "And what is the word, sir?" "A navigational error," Harrison said. His voice was flat. A flight of B-52s drifted into contested airspace due to a massive solar flare that disrupted GPS satellites. No munitions were dropped. No Iranian aircraft were engaged. The explosions seen on social media were atmospheric anomalies caused by the same solar event. Miller looked at the deck. And the Iranian broadcast? The towers that were standing and then vanished? "The Iranians are calling it a civil defense exercise," the Admiral replied. "They claim they were testing a new emergency broadcast system. They are not mentioning the strike. They are not mentioning the blue light. And they are certainly not mentioning Major Javan." Miller took a breath. "He saved my aircraft, sir. He flew into the path of those missiles." "I know," Harrison said, "and you saved his." But in the history books, none of it happened. We are calling it the Ghost Strike. Both sides realized that if the truth came out, we would be forced into a war that neither of us can win. The Iranians used a digital shadow to hide a physical ruin. We used a technical malfunction to hide a successful hit. We are both lying to keep the peace. 3 days later, an undisclosed airbase in the American Midwest. Major Miller sat in a small office. He was looking at a satellite photo that had been cleared for his eyes only. It showed the Bandar Abbas site. The craters were being filled with fresh sand. The twisted metal had been hauled away. In its place, they were already building new towers. Not decoys this time, real ones. On his desk was a small, unmarked envelope. It had been delivered through a neutral diplomatic channel in Switzerland. Inside was a single piece of paper. There was no letter, no signature, only a set of hand-drawn coordinates. Miller recognized them immediately. They were the exact coordinates. of the patch of ocean where he and Javan had shared the silent sky. Below the numbers, a single word was written in English: eyes. Miller folded the paper and put it in his pocket. He knew he would never fly in the Gulf again. He had been reassigned to a training wing in North Dakota. Javan, he suspected, had been moved even further away. The strategic assessment was clear. Modern warfare had entered a phase where the image was more powerful than the weapon. A digital hologram could stop a bomber. A subterranean capacitor could blind a fleet. But the technology had a flaw. It could not account for the two men inside the cockpits. When the screens went black and the sensors failed, the machines became useless. In that darkness, the only thing left was the human element, the judgment of two pilots, who chose to see each other as men instead of targets. The morning sun began to rise over the runway in North Dakota. It was a cold, honest light. It didn't hide anything. It didn't project a ghost. Miller walked toward a line of waiting B-52s. The world was at peace, for now, but he knew the next shadow was already being rendered. In the age of digital war, the hardest thing to believe is your own eyes.